Welcome everyone to our ongoing class on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 universal Noahide commandments, the divine law for all of mankind, except for the Jewish people. We are currently studying from the actual text in Maimonides, in the Rambam, in the laws of kings, which are the last laws of the entire Rambam. We're in the middle of chapter 9. We're actually up to halacha 9, paragraph or law 9. So we're up to 9 in the laws of kings, in the book of Shoftim, of Judges. And we are going to continue now. Tes 9. Ben Noach, a Noahide, which again is any human being on the face of the earth that is not of the Jewish faith. Man or woman, whatever they consider themselves, whatever nationality, they are considered a Ben or a Bas Noach. What we're learning here is not the same law for a Jew, as the Rambam will actually specify in certain cases. So the focus right now is on the non-Jew. We're learning it from the Rambam, and as we discussed in earlier classes, the reason why the Rambam is putting it in his book of law, in the Jewish law book, is because there is an obligation upon the Jew to see to it that the non-Jew keeps those 7 laws. And therefore, the Jew needs to know what they are so that he can teach them and transmit them to the non-Jewish world. A Ben Noach, chayav al hagezel. He is liable for stealing. Whenever we say chayav, which means liable, unless we specify otherwise, the assumption is that it is a capital offense and he is to be put to death. Nowadays, that would be theoretical, but ideally, when the world runs the way that it's supposed to be, so then he would be put to death either by the non-Jewish court system, or if it's in the times where we have a Ger Toishav, where we have all the Jewish people residing in the Holy Land of Israel, and we have the Jewish court system with the Supreme Court of 71, known as the Sanhedrin. So that would be the situation. So for stealing, for robbing, this is a capital offense. Bein shegazal goy, whether this Ben Noach, this non-Jew, stole from a goy, from a non-Jew. Bein shegazal Yisrael, whether he stole from a Jew. No difference. The echad hagoizel, whether he robbed, which the halachic term, the biblical word that we're using here, we have a couple of words for stealing. So goizel means when he is robbing the individual out in the open, like at gunpoint, in the middle of the day, in broad daylight, something like that. Oy hagoinev mamoin, or whether he steals property, which the term goinev would mean stealing secretly, like breaking in the middle of the night, where he does not want his identity known. Either way, robbing, stealing, oy goinev nefesh, or stealing a life, not to be confused with murder, so maybe I should use the common English word, which is kidnapping. All right, goinev nefesh means if someone steals someone else. Adult, child, makes no difference. Like he took him as a slave. By force, he took someone, and that's a form of stealing. So whether it's property, money, or kidnapping. Oy hakoivesh schar sachir, or if someone is withholding payment of a hired worker. So if there was a certain agreement made that so-and-so will be paid up for his work by the end of the day, by the end of the week, by the end of the month, by the end of the year, or by a certain date, whatever they made up. Either there is a set rule that is the common practice at that time in that location, so then if they didn't specify otherwise, then that's what it goes by. Or if they made themselves a certain contract and they specified. Whatever the case is, there comes the time that the employer owes his employee money. And if he withholds the payment, that is a form of stealing. Or anything similar to that. Even a hired, paid worker who ate while it wasn't the time of doing his work. Now, what the Rambam is referring to over here, very interesting, because again, as I keep emphasizing, that these are the laws for the non-Jew, and we're not to get confused with the Jewish law, yet here is a very clear implication to a Jewish law, a commandment actually, and that is that if a Jew is working for another Jew, so we're talking straight Torah, we're talking directly Jewish law in the Bible, only about Jews for the moment. A Jew was hired by another Jew to work in his field. All right? Classical example, in his vineyard to harvest the grapes and to gather them and then to bring them in so that they can make wine and or dry them into raisins or eat grapes, whatever. Now, as he's working in the vineyard, there is a very particular commandment, and that is that the hired worker who's getting paid to work in someone else's vineyard is permitted to eat as much of that produce that he's working with. He can eat as many grapes in that field as he wishes. He may not take any home, but he may eat as much as he wants on the job. All right? Now the Rambam is telling us about the Ben Noach, the non-Jew. If he ate while it wasn't the time of working, which clearly implies that this commandment that we just mentioned for the Jew would apply to the non-Jew as well. So if a Ben Noach was hired by another Ben Noach, presumably we would apply the Jewish law, and that is that he is allowed to eat those grapes while he's working. But if it's not during working time, let's say he's working from 9 to 5, and at 5:01, when he's no longer working, he punched out, he's officially finished for the day. If he so much as eats a grape, al hakoil hu chayav. For all of the above, he is liable. V'hareu bichlal gazlan, and he is included in the category of a robber. All of the above. And that is one of the 7 Noahide commandments. It is forbidden for a non-Jew to steal. So any one of these forms of taking or withholding or taking without a right, they're all in the category of Gazlan, and he is liable. Masha'ein kain b'Yisrael, which is not the case with regards to a Jew. And the Rambam is not specifying, but again, as far as a Jew is concerned, there are different rules, different laws altogether as far as these things are concerned. Although a Jew is not allowed to steal either. He can't steal from a Jew, nor from a non-Jew. But it's a whole different category. For example, if a Jew withholds payment of an employee, he is transgressing something else, a different prohibition. He is not transgressing stealing. Whereas the non-Jew, the Ben Noach, is transgressing stealing. So the Rambam is making it quite clear that a Jew has a different set of transgressions. V'chein, and likewise, chayav al pachos mishave pruta. The Ben Noach, the non-Jew, is liable for stealing less than a pruta. A pruta is in Talmudic times and earlier, the smallest coin, the smallest currency. It is the market value of 1/2 of one barley kernel, and that would apply today as well. And therefore, the value of a pruta would fluctuate like anything else, like the value of gold or the value of silver. It's not a particular coin today. It needs to be the value of a pruta, and that is the value of a pruta, which in anywhere you live today, you need to find out what is the market value of a pruta. So in the United States, what is the market value of one grain, one kernel of barley? Half of that is the amount in money of a pruta. The estimate would be probably somewhere between 1 cent and 5 cents. It's probably a little bit less than a nickel. That's a pruta. Changes, depending on the market value. So, in general, for a Jew, less than a pruta is not considered money. And across the board, with very few exceptions, in Jewish law, even though it may not be permitted for a Jew to do certain things, but he wouldn't be obligated. Not only is he not liable for any punishment, he wouldn't even have to repay. It may still be forbidden. For example, if you work out this, according to this pruta, this market value, let's just take an item such as a toothpick, a regular wooden splinter, a toothpick. It was manufactured in a company that manufactures toothpicks from wood. And then you buy them in a little package, and whatever they contain, 100, 200, whatever they have. So what is the actual market value of one toothpick? I'm pretty sure that it's not even a penny. So for a Jew to steal, to take without permission, a toothpick, even if that's not allowed, he's not liable, and he need not even repay. He need not pay back the owner, the person, the store from whom he stole that toothpick. That is not the case with a ben noyach. A ben noyach who steals less than a pruta, so for example, one toothpick, would be liable. And then, just to illustrate it and to emphasize the point, listen to the last line, or the ruling here in this law. Says the Rambam, Uven noyach, and a Noahide, shegozal, that stole, pachois mishave pruta, less than the value of one pruta, which we just said is liable. Uva acher, and then came someone else, a different ben noyach. Ugizallah mimenu, and stole it from him. So thief number 2 stole from thief number 1. Shneim neheragin aleha. They both get put to death. They both get the death penalty for stealing that toothpick. Pretty harsh. So you have an owner of a store, a shop, regardless whether the owner is Jewish, non-Jewish, makes no difference. Somebody owns this. And one of the items that he sells are toothpicks. Individual toothpicks. And he sells them 10 cents for a handful. All right? There are these loose toothpicks, and when you come to buy them, so give him a dime, and you get to take a handful. Someone came in, and he took one without permission, without paying, and he walked out. That person who did that has committed a capital offense. Person number 3 came over to him and stole that toothpick for him. He now stole from that thief. He needs to be put to death as well. Let me just run through the currency of the Talmudic times very quickly so that we can see the breakdown, just so you could at least hear the different coins. And the Rambam lists them in the laws of shkalim. Shkalim is the annual donation that the Jewish people used to have to do in the times of the Holy Temple, to donate half a shekel, which is a silver coin. So, says the Rambam as follows. He starts with the coin called a selah. A selah is 4 dinar. A dinar is 6 ma'ah. And in the biblical times, in the Chumash, in the Torah, a ma'ah is called a geira. Same thing, geira and ma'ah. 1 ma'ah is 2 pundyoin. A pundyoin is 2 isar. And a pruta is 1/8 of an isar. There are 8 prutas in an isar. So it comes out that the value of a ma'ah is 16 barley. And an isar is 4 barley. And a pruta is half a barley. So that would be the pruta. And just to give you one other example, there are many, many cases where the pruta is relevant in Jewish law. By Jewish law, till this very day, in order for a Jewish man to marry a Jewish woman, the way it's done today, which is one of the 3 ways that he can make her his wife, acquire her to be his wife, and the only way that it's done today is by giving her either money or some physical object, some item which has financial value. That's his, that he's giving it to her as a gift. And commonly, a ring is used, a gold ring. That's what's used. Under the chuppah canopy, he places a gold ring on her finger. And with that, they are married. A moment before he puts the ring on her finger, they are not married at all. The moment he puts the ring on her finger with the intention of marriage, under the chuppah, in the presence of 2 witnesses, they are then completely 100% married. That is the moment where the marriage goes into effect by Jewish law. Now, the gold ring is the money that he's using to marry her. Doesn't have to be a ring, doesn't have to be gold. It has to have a minimum value of 1 pruta. A gold ring is much more than a pruta. It's real gold. I don't think it's possible to really to get your hands on gold that's not worth a pruta. It would probably be almost microscopic because of the value of gold. So a gold ring, I would assume, a plain gold ring, just a plain gold ring, must be worth, I guess, at least $100. And a pruta, as we said, is roughly 3 cents. So, in theory, if the man was to be mekadesh, was to marry the woman, not with a gold ring, but he wanted to give her an item, okay? If he gave her a pencil, he gave her a simple pencil, that would be an interesting question. We'd have to figure out what is the actual market value of the pencil. And that might be pretty close. It may not be worth a pruta. I think it probably is. So again, if the pencil is worth 10 cents? No question. She's married. He gave her a pencil instead of a gold ring. Okay? If it's not, if a pencil doesn't have that value, if he gave her a toothpick, a wooden toothpick, it doesn't matter what kind of sentimental value it has and why in the world he's giving her a toothpick. Doesn't matter. This is the toothpick that he was using when he first saw her and first met her, so it has a lot of sentimental value to him, and he associates her with this toothpick. And he's giving it, doesn't matter. The toothpick is not worth a pruta, they're not married. So any item that's his, that's worth a pruta, he can give her. Even if she has no use for it, if she accepts it. So anything, a garment, a shoelace, is the shoelace worth a pruta? Then they're married. If not, they're not. So that's just one example of where a pruta plays a role. And again, when it comes to bnei noyach, the pruta is irrelevant. And that's pretty much because all of the different measurements that we have in the Torah, it's really in the oral Torah, the oral tradition that God told Moses orally, as far as the amounts of how much a person must eat in order to transgress non-kosher food, or we have so many measurements in Jewish law. Minimum, maximum. Basically, all of that is only for the Jew. When it comes to the non-Jew, to the ben noyach, the slightest amount is forbidden. In this case, we're speaking about stealing property, no matter how little, no matter how seemingly insignificant and worthless it is. If it is something which belonged to someone else and it was stolen, that is a capital offense. Next, halacha yud, number 10. V'chein, and likewise, chayav al eiver min hachai ve'al basar min hachai. Another prohibition for a ben noyach, one of the 7, is eating a limb or a part of an animal that came from a living animal. It was detached while it was still living. It could either, it's commonly referred to as aver min hachai, which literally means a limb. But as the Rambam says here, or basar, it could be flesh, not even an actual limb. Anything which came from the living. And what is the amount? Bichol shehu. Anything, the slightest amount that he eats. Again, in contrast to the Jew, where pretty much, in most cases, in order for the Jew to be liable for transgressing by eating something which is forbidden, which is non-kosher, for the Jew to eat an animal which is non-kosher, or an animal which was not properly ritually slaughtered, or for a Jew to have blood, to eat blood, or drink blood, or pretty much anything which is prohibited from eating. In general, there is a specific amount, and that amount is referred to in Talmudic terminology as a kezayis. It's a certain amount. To put it in today's measurements, in the U.S., it would be roughly it's about between 25 and 28 gram. It's just under an ounce. So just under an ounce is the measurement, which means that if a Jew ate half an ounce of pork, he would not be liable for whatever the penalty is for a Jew eating pork. I'm not saying that he's allowed to do that, but the punishment he doesn't get. Because there's a certain measurement, certain amount. Ben Noach, no such thing. Whatever he can't eat, and the only thing a Ben Noach cannot eat, is whatever falls into this category of Aver min hachai, limb or part of a living, as we're about to explain. Sheloi nitnu hashiurin el Yisrael bilvad. And here the Rambam states it quite clearly. Because the measurements were only given for the Jewish people. All the measurements, by the way, are all part of the oral tradition. You will not find it written in the scripture, in the verses, in the text, in the Bible. So in the oral law, we have passed down, all the way back from Moses getting it from God at Sinai, the measurements. All of those measurements, whether it's weight, or volume, or size, whatever it may be, depending on which mitzvah we're talking about, they are all only for the Jewish people. Which comes out kind of ironic. You can have two people sitting next to each other. Mr. Jew, or should I say Rabbi Jew, and Mr. Non-Jew. They both eat the exact same amount of the exact same type of a food. Both of them. They both walk into a restaurant. They are both served the exact same amount. The Jew is not liable, and the non-Jew is. Not only will the non-Jew be put to death for what he ate, the Jew won't even receive the 39 lashes, which normally he would get for eating non-kosher. Why? Because they both ate half of this measurement called a kazayas. Half an ounce of Aver min achai. The Jew can't eat Aver min achai either. He's forbidden. But it's got to be at least a kazayas for the Jew. The non-Jew, no measurement. And then the Rambam rules that he is permitted, the non-Jew, the Ben Noach, is permitted to eat blood that came from a living animal. The next three halachas, 3 paragraphs, the Rambam is going to explain this prohibition and define Aver min hachai. So we'll see it inside, because I know that it's not yet clear what exactly we mean by a limb or a part of a living animal. Yud Aleph, 11. Echad ha'aver, whether it's a limb, oy habasar, or the flesh, ha'poiresh, which becomes separated, min ha'behema oy min ha'chaya. Behema and chaya are 2 types of animals, and I don't think there's an accurate English translation. It wouldn't be domesticated and non-domesticated. It wouldn't be a beast and an animal. It's 2 different types of animals that the Torah makes this distinction. So, behema includes all sorts of animals, and chaya includes other animals. Basically, it's any type of an animal. So any limb or flesh that was detached, that came from an animal, before that animal died, then that flesh is forever forbidden to be eaten. Aval ha'oif. But what about fowl, birds, anything like that? Chicken, turkeys, any of that? Yeroyali, it appears to me, says the Rambam, she'ein ben Noach neherag al Aver min hachai mimenu, that a ben Noach would not be put to death, which implies that it's still forbidden. He would not be put to death for eating Aver min hachai from it. So the Rambam's ruling, and he's using a term that he uses when he doesn't have an absolute source for what he's saying, because otherwise he takes everything from the ruling of the Talmud. Here the Rambam says, it appears to me that a ben Noach would not be put to death, which implies that it's still forbidden, but it's not a capital offense, if he eats Aver min hachai, a fowl. In other words, a chicken was hunted or was shot. The chicken is still absolutely alive, and someone very cruel came along and chopped off a leg of that chicken. Chicken's alive when the leg was detached. Now, whether they kill the chicken instantly or whether the chicken suffers and bleeds to death, it's irrelevant. that chicken leg is Aver Minachai. Says the Rambam, if a non-Jew eats that chicken leg, he will not be put to death because it's coming from fowl, not from a behema or a chaya, not from an animal. Yud Beis, 12. Hashoichet es habehema. One who slaughters an animal. Afilu shochat bashnei asimonin. Even if he severed both simonim, both pipes. There are two pipes in the neck that would be cut in order for it to be considered shechita, slaughtering. The windpipe and the food pipe. And for a behema, for an animal, in order for it to be considered a kosher shechting, more than half of each one of those two pipes needs to be cut with the knife. That is called shechita. So more than 50% of the windpipe and more than 50% of the food pipe has to be cut. The moment that happens, that animal was properly and kosher slaughtered. A Jew may now eat that behema, provided that all the other steps are going to be. But the initial step, the first thing is shechting it. So, if the behema was properly shechted, slaughtered by an expert Jewish shoichet, the man who slaughters, with a perfect slaughtering knife, and both those pipes were cut. Kozman shim ifarkeses. However, so long as that animal is still in convulsions, it's still jumping around, Eiver uvasar, a limb or flesh, hapurshin mimena, which separate from it, asurin livnei noach mishum eiver minachai, are forbidden for bnei noach because of eiver minachai. In other words, a very, very important rule. Shechting, slaughtering, is not what makes meat kosher for a ben noach, but rather the death of the animal, which means that the animal has to be completely still. Now, this is again very interesting, the difference here between the law for the Jew and for the Ben Noach. For the Jew, all that needs to be done to the animal is a proper shechita. It makes no difference what the animal does afterwards. If the animal was properly shechted, both of those pipes were properly cut. Even if the animal continues to run around afterwards for an hour or more, or even if the animal had to be detained and then eventually whatever, that animal's kosher. The shechita was good, and so long as everything meets the requirements afterwards, and then the blood is taken out, and the meat is salted, etc., that animal is kosher for a Jew to eat. Even if someone chopped off a limb or a piece of flesh of that animal immediately after the shechting, the slaughtering, and the animal was still running around on all four, jumping around, that meat is kosher for a Jew. Not for a ben noach. The animal must be completely dead. And when we say dead, we mean to the naked eye of the untrained, unprofessional layman. Not so for a Jew. So here's another case where we're much stricter with the requirements and the definition of life and death for the animal for a Jew and a non-Jew. The only thing is that the Jew really is not allowed to eat that meat until the animal is totally dead. But the meat is allowed, you can detach it, cut it off from the animal before the animal is really dead. That's fine. But just the Jew has to wait before he eats it. Whereas the Ben Noach, as soon as that meat or limb was detached from the animal, if the animal is not still, that is Eiver Min HaChai for a non-Jew. Yud Gimel, 13. Kol she'asur al Yisrael mishum Eiver Min HaChai. Anything and everything which is forbidden for a Jew because it's Eiver Min HaChai. Anything which falls under the category of Eiver Min HaChai for a Jew, asur al b'nei Noach, is forbidden for the Noahide. Anything which a Jew can't eat because it's Eiver Min HaChai, the non-Jew cannot eat. V'yesh sheb'nei Noach chayovim v'lo Yisrael. But then you have that which the Ben Noach may not eat, it's Eiver Min HaChai, but the Jew could. Shebnei Noach echod behema v'chaya, because for the Bnei Noach, whether it's a behema or a chaya, all types of animals, bein tmeya bein tahira, whether it's a non-kosher type, an impure type, or whether it's tahira, whether it's pure. Meaning the list of animals that a Jew is not allowed to eat, those are all tamei, such as a horse, a donkey, a camel, etc. And those that a Jew is allowed to eat, such as an ox, a sheep, goat, etc. Those are tahira, pure. Chayovin olel mishum eiver min hachai, u'mishum basar min hachai. The Bnei Noach, no difference. It doesn't matter. Any and every animal for the Ben Noach, that is Eiver Min HaChai, if a limb or a piece of flesh was detached from the animal before it died. The Eiver Uvasar HaPorshin Mina Mefarkeses, and like we said, now he's spelling it out clearly, a limb or a piece of flesh which is separated, detached from that animal which is still having convulsions after it was killed. It's still, though, not still. Even though a Jew slaughtered both those pipes, behold, it is forbidden for a Ben Noach, and the prohibition is Eiver Min HaChai. Which means that even a kosher animal, such as an ox, or a sheep, that as long as it was properly shechted by a Jew could eat it now. Ben Noach still can't. Which, in theory, would mean as follows. If a Ben Noach wants to really be careful and keep kosher the way he's supposed to, so he figures, I'll be safe and I'll buy only kosher meat, because if Jews can eat it, well, then I can. Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know what kind of meat they serve in Burger King or McDonald's or who knows what. Maybe it's Eiver Min HaChai. I don't know. So to play it safe, I'm going to buy kosher meat. Now, obviously, I don't have to keep Jewish kosher, but I want to be safe, and I want to make sure I have my standards. In theory, that may not work. It may be 100% kosher for the Jew, and yet the Ben Noach would be transgressing eating Eiver Min HaChai. Now, truth is, it's obviously not like that, because they don't do anything to the animal until it is completely still. But, in theory, it would be kosher for the Jew, and not kosher for the Ben Noach. But, practically speaking, I would say that it wouldn't be a bad idea for Bnei Noach to buy only kosher meat in order to play it safe and to keep kosher the way they're supposed to. You really can't go wrong, practically speaking, if you buy kosher meat. Is it necessary to go to that extent? No. If you know for a fact the process of how they kill, let's say, the pigs, how they kill them before they turn them into a package of ham and pork and all that, if you know that the animal is completely killed beforehand, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a Ben Noach eating pork. Enjoy. It's kosher for a Ben Noach. There's nothing wrong with it. So long as you know the process. So you just have to make sure that the way they kill the animal, doesn't matter how they kill the animal, whether it's cruel or not. Doesn't matter whether it's an electric shock or whatever procedure they do. So long as the animal is completely dead before this meat or whatever you're eating was removed and detached from the animal. So much for the prohibition of Eiver Min HaChai. And now we have the last halacha, the last paragraph here, Yud Daled 14, which is going to deal with the seventh and the final of the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach. V'cheitzad mitzuvin heim al hadinin. And how are they, the non-Jewish world, the Bnei Noach, commanded with regards to dinim, to judging, to having a court system, a judicial system? That's mitzvah number 7. After the Torah lists the 6 prohibitions, there's then one positive one, and that is to establish courts of law. What exactly does that entail? Chayovin, they are obligated, lahoishiv dayanin v'shoiftim, to appoint, to place judges, b'chol pelech v'felech, in every county or in every district. Ladun, to judge, b'sheish mitzvos elu, in these 6. Ulahazhir es ha'am, and to warn the people. So people need to be told. People need to be informed. So the mitzvah is to appoint the judges in every district, and their job is then to see to it. They can appoint officers, can appoint teachers, whatever the case is, but to inform everybody about the 6. Uven Noach she'avar alachas misheva mitzvos elu, and a Ben Noach that transgressed any one of these 7, including the appointing of judges, if they fail to do that, or any other one of the 7, yehareg b'saif, shall be killed by the sword, to be beheaded, decapitated. Umipnei zeh, and for this very reason, nischayvu kol baalei Shechem hariga, all the people of the city of Shechem, says the Rambam, this is the reason that they were liable for the death penalty, to be put to death. A quick reminder what the Rambam is referring to. In the book of Bereshis of Genesis, there's an episode there where Jacob, Yaakov, and his children arrive in a city called Shechem. And this is in the land of Israel. And in Shechem, Yaakov's daughter, Dinah, was kidnapped and raped by the prince of the city, the king's son. And he really wanted to marry Dinah. He had her locked up, and basically what happened was sons number 2 and 3 of Jacob, Shimon and Levi, they came up with a plan, and they met with the prince and the king, and they told them that in order for them to stay and to allow intermarriage and to allow them to allow him to marry Dinah, and likewise they would be able to take their daughters and so on, they need to have every single male of the Shechem community circumcise themselves, because this is what we do, and we would not ever marry or allow anyone to marry someone who's not circumcised. And they fell for this, so they went back and they convinced the whole town that everybody has to do this. So they were all circumcised. On the third day of their circumcision, which traditionally that's considered the most difficult day and the day of the most pain, and you can ask any 8-day-old Jewish boy. So the third day after of the bris is the most difficult. So on that day, when everybody was very, very weak, Shimon and Levi, by themselves, each took a sword, and it killed out the entire city of Shechem. Now, when you learn about it in the Torah, in the Bible, it sounds a little bit radical. The two brothers were quite zealous for their sister, but why did they kill out everybody? To kill out the prince and the king, fine. To kill out the criminal, fine. To kill him, but the whole city, says the Rambam, the entire city of Shechem was guilty and was liable for the death penalty. Why? Sheharei Shechem Gozal. Shechem, which is also the name of this prince, he stole. Like we said earlier in Halacha Tes, that kidnapping falls into the category of stealing. So that's a capital offense. So he for sure has to be put to death. V'heim, and they, all of the members of the city, Ra'u, they saw this. It wasn't that the act was done in secret and people didn't know. V'yadu, they knew. The entire city. It was the headlines. Everybody in Shechem knew that Shechem had kidnapped this Jewish girl, so to say, Jewish. V'lo yidanuhu, and they did not judge him. They failed to bring him to justice. Therefore, they are all responsible, and they're all transgressors, not of stealing, of this mitzvah, this commandment, of dinim, of having a court system in place. So in other words, if they fail to judge someone for transgressing any of the 7, then that automatically is a transgression of the 7th. Another point, a ben noyach can be put to death based on the testimony of a single witness. Uvedayon echad, and with a single judge. Need not have 3 judges or a jury or anything like that. 1 judge. Beloy hasra'a, and don't have to have a warning. Valpi kroivin, and based on relatives. The judge could be a relative. Now the Rambam is saying all this in contrast again to the Jewish law, because for a Jew to be punished at all, even just to receive the 39 lashes, let alone a death penalty, it cannot be based on 1 witness. There have to be 2 witnesses. It can't really be 1 judge. It's got to be, depending on the case, if it's a capital offense, it has to be 23 judges. It must be with a warning. There's no such thing as punishing, that the court should punish a Jew without him being warned either by the witnesses or in the presence of the witnesses. They have to tell him that what you're about to do is forbidden, not by a ben noyach. And an immediate relative cannot serve as a witness for a Jew. By Ben Noach, he can. Aval, however, loy be'edus isha. Testimony of a woman is not acceptable. According to Torah law, in the Bnei Noach court system, a woman is not to be a witness. So much for the American law. Because as far as I know, there's no difference between a man or a woman as far as being a witness to testify that they saw someone do something. And a woman should not judge for them either. So a woman should not be a judge. So a woman shouldn't be a witness, should not be a judge. For Jews as well. But even for Bnei Noach. But otherwise, all these rules are different. That basically covers the 7 Noahide commandments. Now in the next chapter, the Rambam is going to take it further and explain more details and more ideas related to Bnei Noach. But as far as the basic 7 commandments, this chapter, chapter 9 that we've just concluded, covers in a nutshell, very briefly, what the 7 are. And even though, as we mentioned many times, even though we're living in a time and in a situation where you can't really enforce it, or surely not with a capital punishment, but that does not exempt people from keeping the laws, even if there is no punishment. Still in all, everybody is responsible and required to know what they are and to keep them. Every Ben Noach is obligated to keep the 7 Noahide commandments, and the benefit, of course, is that there's peace, domestic peace, universal peace, and there's recognition of God, and it's a better world. It's the world the way that God intended for it to be, and the obligation lies upon the Jew to see to it to get the non-Jew to keep these laws, and any non-Jew that knows it obviously should try to influence others as well and teach it to others and spread this positive idea, because it's not just a good idea or a nice suggestion, but it is absolutely God's laws for all of mankind. So, wishing everybody much success in the study and in the observance of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and making this world the perfect world with a complete revelation of Mashiach now.
You can register for the Noahide Mitzvah and Lifestyle course at NETIV.net.